Welcome to FP&A Coach. Today we'll be talking about AOV sensitivity and how that has an impact on the full P&L and some scenarios to walk through and what changes in the AOV could mean for profitability and how that could drive more profit for the business and be that strategic lever from the FP&A org to help assist the rest of the business. AOV, for those who don't know, it just stands for average order volume. And that's typically in an e-commerce setting, for instance, that's typically calculated by units per transaction called UPT times the average sales price. Those two numbers multiplied together will give you AOV. And we'll walk through a couple scenarios in this next tab. So this is what we'll be working with. This is what we'll be working with up here to calculate the product revenue and get the gross margin and be able to go from there. So here's the output. It's the unit price, UPT, and then we have some COGS as well to be able to do some gross margin analysis. So for revenue, we need to figure out the AOV. This is only going to be one single order that we look at today. If you wanted to gross this up to a full P&L, you would just multiply the AOV by the number of orders that you're talking about. But we're just running one order to test some sensitivities against that. So here, to calculate AOV, like I mentioned earlier, it's just calculating the unit price times UPT. So this gets 105 for this first scenario. We'll just copy that over and we'll get 150. And we'll see the differences that drives for the overall P&L. So for revenue for this one order, it's just going to be, you could think about this like times AOV times one. If you wanted to think about one order, if you want to do it times 100 orders or however many orders you ship out, you can multiply that. But for today, we'll just keep it per one order. So product COGS. So this is the unit metric over here. So this is going to be a per unit. So we have to take this $50 per unit times the 1.5. And then we'll add the shipping costs. Again, since this is just per order, we'll just put it in there directly. No need to multiply it. And we'll just copy and paste this over. So the first thing that I want to show here is we're keeping all the COGS same in this scenario. The thing that's changing though is the unit price. And given that the same UPT is being purchased, there's a higher AOV. And in reality, maybe the UPT drops down a little bit because of the unit price increase and the elasticity of that. But just to demonstrate that the impact on this is when we look at the P&L, since COGS are being the same, this $45 difference here, that's all just flowing to gross profit, which is driving up the gross margin. So this is, we'll run through a couple sensitivities as well on the right hand side here, where we'll demonstrate this more. But the easiest path to improving profitability is increasing price. Now, that has some trade-offs with it as well, where price may deter customers. You may not get the market share that you want. So there are some other factors to take into consideration. But just from a black and white standpoint on the P&L, price is going to be the easiest lever to pull to dramatically improve margins because whatever price change here, this $45, there's no change within the rest of the P&L. This is all just dropping to the bottom line. Now, in reality, if it's an e-commerce business, that $45 will have a credit card processing fee attached to it as well. So there will be some additional marginal cost, but it won't be dramatic. You're not talking about shipping, like your shipping cost doesn't increase because you increase the price. So you're able to, another way to think about it, you're able to amortize that shipping cost over a higher dollar amount. So what we'll do is we'll run through some sensitivities as well, just to show what this gross margin impact could be, and just looking at some of the UPT versus uh, average price increases and what that can drive to the overall P&L. So we're going to do some data tables, and if you're not familiar with data tables, that's okay. We're going to walk through it, but we're going to we're going to look at the sensitivity of gross margin. So we're going to see here what different average unit prices and UPTs will have on gross margin. So to do that, we'll just go here, select the the array of the table that you're looking to work with. You go to data table and you have a row input and a column input. Um, Sometimes I get confused in this, and it's easy to switch around if you do get confused. So for the row input, we'll put UPT, and then for the average unit price, we'll just select the unit price. It's important to select it over here in this table and set it up this way, because whatever variables that you're affecting here has to drive this 21.9. So these variables are all tying back and eventually affecting this 21.9. And I'll show you more when we go through a live example here. So I think I put the variables in incorrectly there. Like I said, I get those confused all the time. So we'll go back here. Row input, we'll just do that as the selling price. Oops. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is more accurate now. So what this is telling us is this is just telling us what the gross margin would be at these different output levels. So for us to test this and see if it's working, what we can do is we can go to these two variables, $70 and 1.5 over in this data table, and see that this 21.9 ties out to this 21.9. What we can also do is we can change UPT to 3, um, unit price to 90. We get 41.9. If we go over here, 90 and 3. Yep, that's row 3, 41.9. So you can see that it's tying out, and that's always a recommendation I would make. So test your data table with the data that you're working with, just to make sure that it's flowing through and working properly. So this is great. What you'll see here is there's improvements in gross margin for every UPT increase, but then also for every unit price increase. But what we want to figure out is how sensitive is the gross margin to every change in either UPT or average order price. So for first, we're going to look at what the difference on UPT is. So to do that, all we do is look at the change from one scenario to the next scenario. All these are individual scenarios. So we're just looking at the change from one scenario to the next scenario. And if they're if they're equal amounts, which you typically want to do in a data table, they're equal amounts for each scenario, you can just quickly just spin up another table and just see what this change is for scenario to scenario. So you can say for each quarter uh, each quarter increase for UPT for instance, like $60 per unit. It's not exactly linear, which is okay, but you could say on average, it's going to be almost 75 basis point impact on gross margin. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is what's going to drive the highest change to the overall AOV. Is it going to be UPT, which we're isolating here, or is it going to be price? So in this next table, all we're doing here is we're just taking the previous price minus the new price and seeing what the difference in gross margin is for that scenario. And this is where we'll see these like much more material changes. And you'll see that it's greater on the $50. This is the same for UPT, just because the percentage change in the average price is getting less and less. So $10 increase over $40 is 25%. It's 10% over here. So the magnitude of the change is getting less and less, which also would mean should be less difficult and less price elasticity, or less price barriers that you'll run into by increasing the price. So like maybe the 6% is like more realistic than this 29%. But you'll have to apply that on individual scenarios. But this is just to show that for each $10 increase in price, what you can experience in terms of gross margin improvement. So let's go to UPT of 2, increasing the price by 10 for $70, gross margin is going to increase by 10%. So up here, it's going from 23% to 30%. Now, that's the financial view of this. And so how do you take this to the business and figure out how to add value with this? What you would do is you'd figure out strategies on either how do you increase UPT or how do we find different customer segments so we can be selling a higher average price, or do you want to be down market, but then you'd expect a certain amount of market share? That's when volume comes into play, which we're not going to address that in this video today. But volume's the other aspect of this where there's about three dimensions. So UPT, selling price, which gives you AOV, then AOV times volume. That's how you'd figure, do you want to be on the like a more mass market type of product with lower gross margins, but your gross profits going to be dollars are going to be higher because you're getting greater volume? Or do you want to target higher end customer? Um, think something like luxury goods where there's like a scarcity value, but you can sell a higher price at lower units. So maybe your gross profit dollars are like similar and your gross margin is really strong. You're just not producing the same amount of volume. Both models work. They work in many industries. Just look at like, for instance, like cars or handbags or things like that, where there's mass market operators, but then there's also luxury brand operators. So it really depends on like what your cost structure is, your brand appeal, and that's where FP&A can tie into the rest of the org as well to figure out how do we want to strategically align the P&L to what we're trying to achieve in both brand and marketing and perception. Um, so this is the finance view on it. Hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions, please add those in the comments. But also please like and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more videos to come. Thank you.